What would you do if your own sister stole not just your money, but your dignity, burning through thousands of dollars in your name while everyone around you kept making excuses for her? When the credit card statement arrived that morning, showing $20,000 in charges I never made, I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about 36 years of being invisible in my own family. And for the first time in my life, I decided I was done being the good daughter who always forgave, always understood, always stayed quiet while my sister took everything she wanted. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I've spent 36 years perfecting the art of being invisible in my own family. Not by choice, mind you, but by circumstance. While my younger sister Vanessa floated through life on a cloud of parental adoration, I became the background noise, reliable, predictable, and utterly forgettable. That Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Shaker Heights was like every other Sunday dinner from the past decade. The dining room smelled of Mom's pot roast, and Dad sat at the head of the table, carving the meat with the same precision he'd once used in his accounting firm before retirement. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, as always, helping Mom set the table while Vanessa breezed in 40 minutes late, as always, with some breathless story about traffic that no one questioned. "Oh, Vanessa, you look absolutely gorgeous," Mom gushed, abandoning the gravy boat to fuss over my sister's new highlights. "Doesn't she look stunning?" "Richard." Dad glanced up from the roast, his face softening in that way it only did for Vanessa. "Beautiful as always, princess." I watched from my seat, the one I'd occupied since childhood, middle of the table, facing the wall with the faded family photos where Vanessa featured prominently in every frame. My promotion at Harborline Logistics 2 months ago hadn't even warranted a phone call from them, but Vanessa's new hair color was apparently worthy of a 5-minute discussion. "It cost $400, but Marco is just a genius with color," Vanessa said, tossing her admittedly beautiful blonde waves. "You really do get what you pay for." $400. I mentally calculated how many hours of overtime that represented for me, how many nights staying late at the warehouse, reviewing shipping manifests and negotiating with carriers to save the company money that would eventually, hopefully, help fund my dream of starting my own logistics consulting firm. "Rachel brought dessert," Mom mentioned offhandedly, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen where my homemade apple pie sat cooling. I'd spent 3 hours on it yesterday, using Grandma's recipe that Mom always claimed to love. "Store-bought crust again?" Vanessa asked, wrinkling her nose. "Actually, I made everything from scratch. Did I tell you about my trip to Cabo next month?" Vanessa interrupted, launching into a detailed itinerary of the resort she'd booked, the spa treatments she'd planned, the restaurants she'd researched. No one asked how a part-time yoga instructor who worked maybe 10 hours a week could afford a 5-star Mexican vacation. The bank of Mom and Dad, I assumed, remained open for business, just not for all customers. As Vanessa described the infinity pool overlooking the ocean, I found myself mentally reviewing my own finances, every dollar meticulously saved, every expense carefully considered. My apartment in Ohio City was modest but paid for by my own labor. My 8-year-old Honda Civic ran perfectly because I maintained it myself. I had $42,000 saved toward my business plan, each dollar earned through long hours and careful budgeting. "Rachel, you're being awfully quiet," Dad observed, though his eyes remained on Vanessa. "Just tired from work," I replied. "We're implementing a new inventory system, and—" "Vanessa, tell them about your yoga retreat," Mom interjected. "She's organizing this amazing spiritual journey to Sedona. So entrepreneurial. The word stung more than it should have. My entire career was built on entrepreneurial thinking, on finding efficiencies and innovations in supply chain management. But planning a vacation for other people to pay to attend apparently carried more weight than managing logistics for a company that moved millions of dollars in goods annually." The rest of dinner proceeded predictably. Vanessa's stories dominated the conversation: her complicated love life, her latest shopping finds, her plans to maybe, possibly, potentially Look into getting a real estate license someday. Each announcement met with encouragement and praise from our parents. When I mentioned the industry conference I'd been invited to speak at next quarter, Mom's response was, "That's nice. Dear Vanessa, show them that purse you bought." As I helped clear the table, Vanessa was checking her Instagram. Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You could try a little harder, she said quietly. "Try harder at what? Being happy for your sister. Not everything is a competition." I stared at her, words failing me. Competition implied both parties were actually competing. What we had was one person working herself to exhaustion while the other was handed trophies for showing up. "I am happy for her," I lied, drying the dishes with perhaps more force than necessary. Mom continued, "Vanessa is sensitive. She needs more support than you do. You've always been so capable, so independent. She's different, special, delicate, all code words for the same thing favored." That night, driving home through the quiet streets of Cleveland, I wondered when I'd stopped trying to earn their attention, when I'd accepted that no achievement of mine would ever shine as bright as Vanessa simply existing. Maybe it was when I graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State and they'd missed the ceremony for Vanessa's dance recital. Or when I'd landed my first management position and the celebration dinner was canceled because Vanessa had a bad breakup. But as I pulled into my parking spot, looking up at my apartment windows, I felt something I'd rarely allowed myself to feel: anger. Not the quick flash of irritation that I usually suppressed, but a deep, simmering rage that had been building for 36 years. I didn't know it then, but that anger was about to serve me well, because in less than a week, Vanessa would finally cross a line that even our parents couldn't ignore. And I would be ready. The following Wednesday started like any other. I woke at 5:30 a.m., went through my morning routine, and was at my desk at Harborline Logistics by 7. Dad had called the night before with one of his typical requests: could I help him order something online? His ancient laptop was acting up again, and he needed some specialty golf clubs before his tournament next month. "Just leave your credit card on the kitchen table," I'd told him. "Write down the PIN for the purchase verification, and I'll handle it when I stop by before work." I should have known better. I should have taken the card with me. But I was running late that morning. A conference call with our Shanghai suppliers had been moved up, and I'd simply left everything on my home office desk, planning to handle it during lunch. The day consumed me as it always did. Emergency shipment delays, a truck driver shortage, 3 separate customer complaints that needed immediate attention. Lunch came and went without me noticing. By the time I finally looked up from my computer, it was past 6 p.m., and the office had emptied except for the cleaning crew. I drove home exhausted, grabbed my laptop, and settled onto the couch to finally place Dad's order. The golf website loaded slowly, and I selected the clubs he'd specified, added them to the cart, and reached for where I'd left his credit card that morning. The desk was empty except for the sticky note with the PIN. Strange. I distinctly remembered leaving it right there, next to my coffee mug. I searched the desk drawers, checked the floor, even looked in the trash can thinking maybe I'd accidentally swept it up with some papers. Nothing. Then I remembered Vanessa had stopped by around noon. She'd texted asking if she could borrow my steamer for some outfit she needed to refresh for a date. I'd told her where the spare key was hidden, not thinking twice about it. She needed something. I could help. End of story. My stomach began to tighten as I pulled out my phone and opened Dad's banking app he'd given me access months ago when he'd needed help monitoring some suspicious charges. The credit limit was $25,000. The available balance showed $4,312. My hands shook as I scrolled through the transactions from just the past 8 hours. Miami International Airport, flight 1-847 Ritz-Carlton South Beach, reservation $3,200 Neiman Marcus, 2456 Louis Vuitton, Miami Design District, $4,192, Nobu, Miami, 467. Another flight booking, $1,650 Versace Boutique, 3234 Spa Package at the Ritz, $1,100. The list went on. Designer clothes, jewelry, restaurant charges, club entrance fees, a shopping spree that had started at 12:45 p. Less than an hour after Vanessa had been in my apartment and continued throughout the afternoon. I called the credit card company first, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. The representative was sympathetic but clear since the purchases were made with the correct PIN, and since it was a family member with potential access to the card, this would be treated as a family dispute rather than fraud. The charges would stand unless the primary cardholder, my father, wanted to press criminal charges. My next call was to Vanessa. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. She was probably on a plane to Miami right now, flying first class on my father's dime. I sat in my living room, staring at the transaction list, watching as 2 more charges appeared in real-time room service at the Ritz for $387 and a poolside bar tab for $215. She wasn't even trying to hide it. The worst part wasn't the money, though $20,000 was more than some people made in a year. It was the casual cruelty of it. The absolute certainty she must have felt that there would be no real consequences. That Mom and Dad would fuss and fume but ultimately forgive her, as they always did. That I would stay quiet, as I always did. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Finally. But it wasn't an explanation or an apology. It was a selfie from a beach cabana, her fresh highlights gleaming in the sunset, a cocktail in her manicured hand. The caption read, "Sometimes you just need to treat yourself. Jotter self-care, Jotter Miami vibes." Another text followed. "Thanks for leaving Dad's card out. He always makes everything so complicated with his passwords and stuff. Tell him I'll pay him back when I can. You know how it is." When I can. We both knew what that meant. Never. I screenshot everything, the transactions, her texts, the timestamps that proved she'd taken the card from my apartment. Then I called my father. "Dad," I said when he answered, "we have a problem. Can it wait until tomorrow? Rachel Jeopardy is about to start. Vanessa stole your credit card from my apartment. She's charged over $20,000 in the past 8 hours. She's in Miami right now, at the Ritz-Carlton." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "That's impossible," he finally said, but his voice had lost its usual confidence. "I'm sending you the screenshots now." More silence. Then, in the background, I heard my mother's voice. "What's wrong, Richard? You look pale." "Check your phone, Dad," I said, "and then call me back when you're ready to actually do something about this." I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving for when I finally had something to celebrate. As I sipped it, looking at Vanessa's Instagram story showing her shopping bags and beach views, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just another one of Vanessa's little transgressions to be swept under the rug. This was $20,000 of undeniable evidence that even my parents couldn't ignore. For the first time in 36 years, Vanessa had finally gone too far. The call came at 9:15 p.m., not from Dad, but from Mom, her voice shrill with barely contained hysteria. "You need to come over right now. We're having a family meeting." "Has Vanessa responded to your calls?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Just get here, Rachel, and don't make this worse than it already is. Don't make it worse. As if I was the one who'd stolen $20,000. When I arrived at my parents' house, Vanessa's BMW was already in the driveway apparently. She'd cut her Miami trip short when Dad threatened to cancel the credit card entirely. I found them all in the living room, my parents on one couch. Vanessa curled up in Dad's leather recliner like a scolded child, despite being 33 years old. She'd clearly been crying. Her mascara was strategically smudged just enough to look pitiful, but not enough to be ugly. She was still wearing what looked like a new designer dress. Price tag, probably 4 figures. "Rachel." She jumped up when she saw me, arms outstretched for a hug. "This is all such a misunderstanding." I stepped back, avoiding her embrace. "A misunderstanding. You took Dad's credit card from my apartment and charged $20,000. What exactly did I misunderstand? The card was just sitting there." Vanessa's voice rose to that pitch she used when playing the victim. With the pin right next to it, it was basically an invitation. An invitation. I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and sharp. I invite you to get your steamer, and you think that's an invitation to commit credit card fraud. Don't be so dramatic, she huffed, collapsing back into the chair. It's not fraud when it's family. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone. According to Ohio state law, credit card theft over $1,000 is a fifth-degree felony, punishable by 6 to 12 months in prison and up to $2,500 in fines. Family member or not? The room went silent. Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while Mom looked like she might faint. You looked that up. Vanessa's voice was small, scared for the first time. I look up a lot of things, I replied. Like how the Ritz-Carlton charges $3,200 for a room you stayed in for exactly one night, or how you managed to spend $4,892 at Louis Vuitton in 37 minutes. I was going to pay it back, Vanessa protested. With what money? Dad finally spoke, his voice deadly quiet. You work 10 hours a week teaching yoga. You live in an apartment I pay for, drive a car I bought, and eat food your mother brings you because you can't be bothered to grocery shop. I'm building my brand, Vanessa shot back. You've never understood my vision. Your vision. Dad stood up, something I'd rarely seen him do during Vanessa's tantrums. Your vision cost me $20,000 in 8 hours, money I saved for retirement. Richard, calm down, Mom intervened, reaching for his arm. Your blood pressure. Don't. He shook her off. Don't you dare make excuses for her this time, Linda. Not this time. He turned to Vanessa, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. The card was on Rachel's desk because I asked her to help me order something, one simple favor, and you turned it into this. He gestured helplessly at his phone, where the credit card statement was still displayed. I needed a break. Vanessa whined. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My Instagram engagement has been down, and Marcus broke up with me, and stop. The word came out of my mouth before I could think. Just stop. You needed a break. I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. I work 60-hour weeks. I've saved every penny to start my own business. And you just... What, decided you deserved my father's money because your Instagram likes are down? You've always been jealous of me, Vanessa spat, the victim mask slipping to reveal the venom underneath. Jealous? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of what? Your complete inability to function as an adult, your pathological need to take everything that isn't nailed down, the fact that you're 33 and still throwing tantrums like a toddler. Rachel, that's enough, Mom said weakly. No, Mom, it's not enough. It's never been enough. Nothing I do is enough for this family, but everything Vanessa does is excused. Well, not this time. I turned to my father. Press charges or don't. But if you don't, you're telling her that $20,000 is the price you're willing to pay to avoid admitting what she really is, a thief. How dare you? Vanessa shrieked, jumping up from the chair. I'm your sister. Yes, I said, meeting her eyes. You're my sister, and you stole from our father using my apartment, my trust, and my reputation. You made me an accomplice to your crime. Dad sank back onto the couch, suddenly looking every one of his 72 years. I need the money back, Vanessa, all of it. I can't. I already spent most of it. Then you'll have to get a job, he said simply. A real job, full-time, and you'll pay me back every cent. That'll take forever, Vanessa wailed. Then you'd better get started, I said, pulling out my laptop. I'll draft a repayment agreement tonight, legal and binding. She pays back $500 a month minimum, with interest at the current market rate. Interest? Vanessa's face went pale. From family. You charged luxury goods on a credit card with 24% APR. I replied, Dad's paying interest to the credit card company because of you. Why shouldn't you pay him? For the first time in my life, I saw my parents look at Vanessa without the usual filter of blind adoration. They saw what I'd always seen, a spoiled, entitled woman who'd never faced a real consequence in her life. Draft the agreement, Dad said quietly. And Vanessa, you'll sign it tomorrow, or I will press charges. The house erupted in shouting, Vanessa screaming about betrayal, Mom crying about keeping the family together, Dad yelling about respect and responsibility. But I just sat there, calm in the chaos, typing up the legal document that would finally hold my sister accountable. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at my parents' house at 9 a.m. sharp with 3 copies of the repayment agreement I'd spent hours perfecting. It wasn't just a simple IOU, it was an airtight legal document that outlined payment schedules, consequences for default, and most importantly, collateral. Vanessa was already there, wearing sunglasses indoors and clutching a venti Starbucks drink that probably cost $8. Mom sat beside her, rubbing her back like she was comforting a child who'd skinned their knee, not a grown woman who'd committed felony theft. "This is ridiculous," Vanessa muttered as I laid out the documents on the dining room table. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal from each other," Dad said firmly. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight, but there was a resolve in his eyes I'd never seen before. I walked them through the agreement methodically. The total amount owed is $20,347, including the interest already accrued on Dad's credit card. Monthly payments of $500 minimum, with a 3% annual interest rate on the remaining balance. 3%, Vanessa shrieked. "That's highway robbery." "Actually, it's well below market rate," I replied calmly. "Current personal loan rates are between 6 and 12%, Dad's being generous. At $500 a month, it'll take me over 3 years to pay this off. 3 years and 7 months. Actually, assuming you only pay the minimum, you could pay more and reduce the timeline." "With what job?" she spat. "Who's going to hire me?" "That's your problem to solve," I said, sliding the pen across the table. "Sign on pages 3, 7, and 12. Vanessa picked up the pen, then stopped. "What's this about collateral, your BMW?" Dad said. "The title goes in my name until the debt is paid. You keep driving it, but if you miss 2 consecutive payments, I sell it?" "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," he replied. That car is worth at least $15,000. It's my insurance policy." For a moment, I thought Vanessa would storm out. Her face cycled through rage, disbelief, and finally, when she looked at Dad's unwavering expression, defeat. She signed the papers with vicious strokes, nearly tearing through the pages. "There," she said, throwing the pen down. "Happy now." "Ecstatic," I replied dryly, notarizing each signature with the stamp I'd brought from work. "Dad, you'll need to sign here as well." As he signed, I noticed Mom hadn't said a word throughout the entire process. She sat there, wringing her hands, looking between her daughters like she was watching her world collapse. "Now," I continued, pulling out my tablet, "let's discuss employment. I've taken the liberty of finding several job openings that match Vanessa's. Limited qualifications." "Limited," Vanessa hissed. "Fine. Your yoga certification and bachelor's degree in communications from that online university Mom and Dad paid $40,000 for. There's a receptionist position at a dental office in Lakewood, a customer service role at Progressive Insurance, and a retail position at Nordstrom that pays commission." "Retail." She looked horrified. "I can't work retail." "You can't afford not to work at all," I countered. "These all pay between $15 and $18 an hour. Full time. That's about $2,500 a month before taxes, enough to pay Dad and still live. If you budget." "Budget." Vanessa repeated the word like it was foreign. "I don't know how to budget." "Then you'll learn," Dad said, standing up. "Rachel will teach you." I almost laughed. Of course, even now, I was being volunteered to fix Vanessa's problems. But then I realized this was perfect. Teaching her would mean controlling her finances, watching every penny, ensuring she couldn't wiggle out of this commitment. "Fine," I agreed. "Weekly meetings, you'll bring pay stubs, receipts, and bank statements. We'll go over every expense." "This is humiliating," Vanessa whined. "No," I said, gathering the signed documents. "Humiliating is having to explain to your apartment complex why you're being evicted, or having your car repossessed, or having your credit destroyed. This is accountability. As I prepared to leave, Mom finally spoke. Rachel, don't you think you're being a bit harsh? I turned to face her, years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. Harsh. When I was 23, I asked to borrow $2,000 to fix my car so I could keep getting to work. You told me to figure it out myself because I needed to learn responsibility. I took the bus for 6 months in Cleveland winters to save up for repairs. But Vanessa steals $20,000 for a shopping spree, and I'm being harsh. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. I'll send you the information about those jobs, I told Vanessa. You have interviews to schedule. As I walked to my car, I heard Vanessa's wail from inside. This is all Rachel's fault if she hadn't left the card out. I didn't stay to hear the rest. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what excuses she made or how Mom might comfort her. The papers were signed. The plan was in motion. Over the next week, I watched with grim satisfaction as reality began to sink in for Vanessa. She applied for jobs with the enthusiasm of someone going to their own execution. The Nordstrom position rejected her immediately, apparently. Her entitled attitude came through even in the application. The dental office scheduled an interview, but called me afterward. I was her reference to politely decline, citing concerns about reliability. Finally, Progressive Insurance offered her a position in their call center. The pay was $16.50 an hour. The hours were 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and the dress code was business casual. 3 things Vanessa had never experienced in her privileged life. I have to be there at 8 in the morning. She'd gasped when she called me. That's inhumane. That's adult life, I replied. You start Monday. Don't be late. The night before her first day, she called me crying. I don't have any business casual clothes. Everything I own is either workout wear or designer dresses. Goodwill has professional clothes, I suggested. There's one on Detroit Avenue. Goodwill. The horror in her voice was palpable. I can't shop at Goodwill. Then wear what you have and hope HR doesn't send you home. She hung up on me, but I smiled as I set my phone down. The princess was finally leaving her tower, and the real world was waiting with all its mundane, relentless demands. Monday would be very interesting indeed. The first month of Vanessa's employment was a spectacular disaster, and I had a front row seat to watch it all unfold. Week 1. She was late 3 out of 5 days. The call center supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Deborah, whom I'd spoken with when verifying employment, had already flagged her for tardiness. Vanessa called me every evening, sobbing about the toxic work environment and the unreasonable expectations. They expect me to be on the phone for 7 hours a day, she wailed during one particularly dramatic call. That's literally the job description, I replied, reviewing her first pay stub that had been direct deposited into an account I'd helped set up, one that automatically transferred $500 to Dad on the first of each month. My throat hurts from talking so much, and the customers are so mean today. A man yelled at me because his claim was denied, like it was my fault. Welcome to customer service, I said, unmoved. Your break time is showing as 47 minutes on Tuesday when you only get 30. That's a violation. I needed extra time to decompress. You need to keep this job to pay Dad back. Week 2 brought new complaints. The business casual dress code was oppressive. The fluorescent lighting gave her headaches. Her supervisor was targeting her by actually expecting her to meet the same metrics as everyone else: average call time, customer satisfaction scores, calls per hour. The designer clothes started disappearing from her Instagram. The Louis Vuitton bag from Miami showed up on Poshmark for 60% of retail. The Versace dress appeared on a luxury consignment site. I tracked every sale, noting with satisfaction as her carefully curated image of wealth crumbled piece by piece. I had to sell my Louboutins, she texted me one night with a string of crying emojis. The red soles were my signature. Your signature is now employed person who pays their debts, I texted back. Week 3. Mom called me, trying to broker peace. Vanessa is really struggling. Rachel, Maybe you could loan her some money just until— No. But she can barely afford food after paying your father. She clears $2,000 a month after taxes, minus $500 for Dad. Her rent is $700 because Dad subsidizes it, leaving her $800 for everything else. I lived on less than that for years. But she's not used to— Then she'll get used to it. I cut her off. Or she'll get a second job. The idea of a second job sent Vanessa into hysterics when I suggested it during our weekly budget meeting. We sat in my apartment, her bank statement spread across my coffee table, red ink marking every frivolous expense. $42 at Starbucks in 1 week, I noted. That's your grocery budget. I need coffee to function. Make it at home. $12 for a pound of coffee lasts 2 weeks. $78 at Sephora. I continued. I needed concealer. The stress is destroying my skin. I pulled up her Instagram, where she'd posted a selfie with a full face of new makeup just yesterday. Interesting definition of needed. By week 4, the cracks were really showing. Her Instagram went from 3 posts a day to radio silence. The BMW, now legally in Dad's name, sat in the parking lot of her apartment complex more often as she realized gas wasn't magically free. The yoga classes she taught dropped from 10 hours a week to 4, then to none as she couldn't manage the schedule with her full-time job. My entire life is ruined, she declared, slumping on my couch after another budget meeting where I'd vetoed her request to reduce Dad's payment to $300 a month. Your life isn't ruined. It's just real now. I hate you, she said, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion. I know, I replied, handing her a grocery list I'd prepared with meals she could prep for under $50 a week. Hate me all you want, but you'll make that $500 payment every month. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. The polished Instagram influencer with her carefully curated life was replaced by someone who looked increasingly like what she'd always been underneath ordinary. Her roots grew out because she couldn't afford her $400 color appointments. Her gel manicures chipped and weren't replaced. The designer workout wear was replaced by Old Navy basics. One evening, I stopped by the Progressive call center to drop off some documents for her supervisor, a performance improvement plan I'd been asked to review as her emergency contact. Through the glass doors of the call center floor, I saw her at her cubicle, headset on, shoulders slumped, reading from a script with dead eyes. She looked up and saw me, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was no defiance left, no spoiled princess demanding special treatment. Just a 33-year-old woman finally experiencing what the rest of us had been doing all along, surviving on our own efforts. I didn't wave. I just dropped off the papers and left. That night, Dad called me. The first payment cleared, he said, and I could hear something in his voice I'd never heard before when talking about Vanessa disappointment mixed with relief. Good, I said. Only 42 more to go. Do you think she'll make it? I thought about Vanessa at her cubicle, about the designer goods being sold off one by one, about the Instagram facade crumbling into nothing. She doesn't have a choice, I said. For once in her life, she actually doesn't have a choice. 3 days later, Vanessa was written up for calling out sick when her Instagram showed her at a brunch spot in Tremont. The suspension was 3 days without pay. The second payment to Dad was short by $150. I'll make it up next month, she promised tearfully at our emergency family meeting. No, Dad said firmly. You'll get a second job this week, or I'm selling the BMW. The look of shock on her face was priceless. The princess was finally understanding that in the real world, actions had consequences that Instagram filters couldn't fix. By month 3, I had assembled a comprehensive file on Vanessa that would make any private investigator proud. Screenshots of every missed payment, every written warning from Progressive, every Instagram post showing her out when she'd called in sick. The folder on my laptop was labeled simply accountability, but it was so much more than that. It was ammunition. The second job had lasted exactly 1 week. She'd picked up evening shifts at a Target in Steelyard Commons, but quit after being asked to clean the restrooms. It was degrading, she'd told our parents, expecting sympathy. She found none. I started my campaign subtly. During Sunday dinners, I'd casually mention my own work achievements within earshot of relatives. The conference in Chicago went well. They want me to keynote next year's event. Meanwhile, I'd ensure someone asked Vanessa about her job, watching her squirm as she tried to spin call center work into something glamorous. But the real plan began taking shape when I discovered Vanessa had been lying about her hours. I'd befriended Deborah, her supervisor, through carefully orchestrated lunch meetings near the Progressive Building. Deborah, it turned out, was more than happy to share her frustrations about my sister over coffee. She claimed she was working from home on Thursday, Deborah confided during one such meeting, but she never logged into the system. When I confronted her, she said she had technical difficulties for 8 hours. That must be frustrating, I sympathized, sliding a folder across the table. These might help if you need to document patterns of behavior. Inside were screenshots of Vanessa's social media from that Thursday at a salon, getting her roots touched up with money she didn't have. I can't officially accept these, Deborah said carefully. But if someone were to anonymously submit them to HR? Of course. I nodded. Anonymous would be best. The termination letter came 2 weeks later. Vanessa was fired for attendance violations and falsifying time records. She had 72 hours to clean out her desk. She called me hysterical. Someone reported me to HR. Someone sent them screenshots from my private Instagram. Your Instagram is public, Vanessa. Has been for years because you wanted more followers. Remember, it was you, she accused. You did this? I've been in meetings all day, I replied calmly, which was true. I'd submitted everything yesterday. Maybe if you'd actually been working instead of posting about Mimosa Mondays, this wouldn't have happened. The family meeting that followed was explosive. Vanessa painted herself as a victim of workplace harassment. Mom wrung her hands. Dad sat silent, calculator in hand, figuring out how the missed payments would affect the loan. She needs another chance, Mom pleaded. This is too harsh. Richard. Too harsh, I interjected, pulling out my phone. Let me show you something. I'd prepared a presentation, yes. An actual PowerPoint detailing Vanessa's finances. Every payment missed, every lie told, every dollar wasted while claiming poverty. Slide 3 shows her spending $120 on DoorDash in a week while telling Dad she couldn't afford the full payment. Slide 7 documents the $4,000 in credit card applications she's been denied because her credit is already tanking. Slide 12. Stop, Dad said quietly. Just stop. But I didn't stop. I moved to slide 13, my masterstroke. 3 weeks ago, Vanessa applied for a personal loan using this house as collateral reference, forging Dad's signature. The room went silent. Mom's face went white. Dad's hands trembled as he reached for the documentation I'd printed. The loan was denied, I continued, but the attempt is fraud, federal fraud, actually, since it crossed state lines through electronic submission. How did you? Vanessa started, then stopped, realizing it didn't matter. I monitor Dad's credit reports. I set up alerts after the credit card theft. Did you really think I'd leave anything to chance? Dad stood up slowly, aging before our eyes. Get out. Dad, Vanessa started. Get out of my house, he roared, the sound shocking everyone. I'd never heard him raise his voice like that, not once in 36 years. Richard. Mom gasped. No, Linda, no more. She tried to steal our house, our retirement, our future. He turned to Vanessa. You have 1 week to find somewhere else to live. The apartment I've been subsidizing. That ends now. Where will I go? Vanessa wailed. That's no longer my concern, Dad said, his voice cold. The BMW gets sold tomorrow. Whatever it brings goes toward your debt. The remaining balance gets sent to collections. Collections will ruin my credit? You ruined your credit, I said, closing my laptop. This is just documenting it officially. As Vanessa sobbed and Mom tried to comfort her, I pulled Dad aside. The BMW should bring about $12,000 at auction. I said quietly. I have a buyer who'll do $15,000 cash, tomorrow. He looked at me with something I'd never seen before: respect. You've planned all of this. Every detail, I confirmed. She needs to understand that actions have consequences. And if she ends up on the street, there's a women's shelter on Detroit Avenue. They have job placement programs. Real fresh starts for people who actually want them. He nodded slowly. Make the sale. That night, I updated my accountability folder with the day's events, but I also opened a new folder labeled Phase 2, because Vanessa's unemployment was just the beginning. Every company she'd apply to would somehow receive anonymous tips about her theft, her fraud, her lies. Every apartment application would be flagged with her credit issues. Every attempt to rebuild her Instagram influence would be met with comments about her criminal behavior. Was it cruel? Maybe. But for 36 years, I'd watched her take everything while giving nothing. I'd been invisible while she shined with a light stolen from everyone around her. Now it was her turn to be invisible, her turn to struggle, her turn to understand what it felt like to have every door shut in your face while watching someone else walk through easily. The BMW sold the next morning. Vanessa's key was confiscated while she screamed in the driveway. Neighbors watching through curtains. Mom cried. Dad signed the papers stone-faced. I deposited the check and updated the payment ledger. Only $5,347 remaining. But Vanessa didn't know about the interest that would keep accruing, or the fees I'd built into the contract for missed payments, or the clause about legal expenses if collection became necessary. By my calculation, she'd be paying this debt for the next decade, and I'd be watching every single payment. The confrontation came on a rainy Thursday evening, 6 months after the theft. I'd just returned from another successful conference where I'd landed 3 new consulting clients for my side business when I found Vanessa waiting in my apartment building's lobby. She looked nothing like the Instagram princess she'd once been. Her hair was drugstore dyed. Her clothes were clearly thrift store finds, and her face had the hollow look of someone who'd learned what real exhaustion meant. "Security let me in," she said before I could ask. "Told them I was your sister." "What do you want?" I kept my keys in my hand, not inviting her up. "To talk. Please, Rachel, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I led her to my apartment. She sat on the same couch where we'd had our budget meetings, looking around at my space, modest but comfortable. Everything earned through my own work. "You destroyed my life," she said without preamble. "You destroyed your own life. I just stopped enabling it. You got me fired. You made Dad sell my car. You turned everyone against me." I poured myself a glass of wine, not offering her any. "I documented your lies. Dad sold the car you never actually owned. And everyone turned against you because they finally saw who you really are. Who I really am." She laughed bitterly. "You want to know who I really am? I'm someone who was never expected to be anything but pretty and charming. Do you know what Mom used to tell me when I was young? You don't need to be smart like Rachel. You have your looks." "That's not my fault," I said, unmoved. "Isn't it?" She stood up, pacing to the window. "You were the smart one, the capable one, the one who didn't need help. So I became the one who did. It was the only way to get their attention. You got $20,000 worth of attention." "I know." She whirled around and I saw tears streaming down her face. "I know what I did was wrong, but you didn't just want justice. You wanted revenge." "Yes," I said simply. "I did." The admission hung between us, stark and honest. "Do you know where I'm living now?" she continued. "A studio apartment in Clark Fulton. 600 square feet with a broken heater and a landlord who looks at me like I'm trash. I work at a warehouse in Brooklyn, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. loading boxes until my back screams. $800 a week if I'm lucky." "That's more than many people make." "But it's not enough." She was almost screaming now. "Not with the debt, the interest you keep adding, the fees. I'll never get out from under it, and you know it. You designed it that way." I designed it to teach you consequences. No, she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. You designed it to bury me. She pulled out a crumpled envelope from her purse, her latest pay stub. $783 for 44 hours of work. After taxes, after the garnishment Dad filed, I have $312. For 2 weeks, my rent is $450 a month. You do the math? Get a second job. With what time? When do I sleep? When do I eat? She was crying harder now. I've lost 30 pounds. My hands shake from the energy drinks I need to stay awake. Is this what you wanted? To see me broken. I wanted you to understand, I said, my voice cold despite the small flicker of something not quite guilt, but recognition in my chest. For once in your life, I wanted you to understand what it's like to work until you can't stand, to count every penny, to watch everyone else have things you can't afford. I understand now. She fell back onto the couch, sobbing. God, Rachel, I understand. Every morning when I can't afford coffee, every night when I eat ramen again, every time I see my old friends posting from places I'll never go again. I understand. Do you? I moved closer, standing over her. Do you understand the Christmas when I couldn't afford to come home because my car was broken and you all went to Vail without me? Do you understand the graduation dinner you all missed because Vanessa had a yoga showcase? Do you understand 36 years of being invisible? I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't pay back $20,000. Neither does destroying me. We stared at each other. Years of resentment and pain laid bare. You want to know the truth, I said finally. Yes, I wanted revenge. Yes, I wanted you to suffer, because you never just took money or things, you took love, attention, pride. Every achievement I had was diminished because Vanessa needed something. Every moment that should have been mine became yours. So this is payback. This is balance, I corrected. For the first time in our lives, the scales are even. You're nobody special, just another person struggling to survive. Welcome to my entire life. She stood up slowly, defeated. I came here to beg you to convince Dad to forgive the debt, or at least stop the interest. No, I know. She walked to the door, then paused. You won. You broke me. You got your revenge. I hope it feels as good as you thought it would. It does, I lied. She left without another word. I stood at my window, watching her walk to the bus stop in the rain. No car, no umbrella, just a broken woman who'd finally learned what the rest of us had always known: life was hard, and no one was coming to save you. Later that night, Mom called. Vanessa came by. She was hysterical. I'm sure she was. Rachel, she's your sister. Yes, I said. She is. And for 33 years, she acted like an only child. Now she gets to know what it feels like to be alone. This isn't you, Mom said softly. This cruelty. No, I agreed. The cruelty was letting her become this person in the first place. I'm just the only one willing to fix it. I hung up and opened my laptop, checking the payment tracker. Vanessa had made her payment this month barely, but with the new interest calculation, she owed more than she had 2 months ago. The math was elegant in its brutality. She'd need a miracle to escape, and I'd made sure miracles were no longer in her vocabulary. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of guilt, but because of the hollow feeling in my chest. Revenge was supposed to taste sweet. Instead, it tasted like nothing at all. But I'd come too far to stop now. The plan would continue. Vanessa would learn her lesson, even if it took years, even if it broke us both in the process. The eviction notice was posted on Vanessa's door on a cold Tuesday morning in November. I knew because I was there, sitting in my car across the street, watching as she discovered it. 3 months of partial rent payments had finally caught up with her. She tore the paper down with shaking hands, looking around as if help might materialize from thin air. It didn't. Mom called me that afternoon, hysterical. She has nowhere to go. Rachel, it's almost winter. There are shelters, I said, organizing invoices for my consulting business that had just secured its biggest contract yet. Or she could get a roommate. Who would room with her? She has no credit, no references, no one to bail her out. I finished. Yes, I know. The family meeting that Sunday was sparse. Dad, Mom, me, and an empty chair where Vanessa should have been. She was working a double shift at the warehouse, trying to scrape together enough for a deposit somewhere. Anywhere. We have to do something, Mom pleaded, but even she sounded defeated now. We did do something, Dad said quietly. For 33 years. We did everything. Look where it led. Rachel could what? I interrupted. Give her money I earned co-sign a lease so she can destroy my credit too. Take her in so she can steal from me again. She's changed, Mom insisted. She's learned her lesson. Has she? I pulled out my phone, showing them Vanessa's latest Instagram post, a picture of her at a bar with friends. Caption reading, "Sometimes you need to treat yourself than dar self-care." That was posted 2 hours ago, I said. While she's supposedly too broke to pay rent. Dad's face hardened. Let her face the consequences. And she did. 2 weeks later, Vanessa moved into a women's transitional housing facility on the west side. Not quite a shelter, but close enough. Shared rooms, curfews, mandatory job training sessions. Rock bottom with institutional beige walls. I drove by once, just to see. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of her in what looked like a group therapy session. Head down, shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear. She'd finally become invisible, just like I'd always been. The debt payments stopped coming. Dad sent the account to collections as promised. Her credit score, already damaged, flatlined completely. Any dream of rebuilding her Instagram influence, her yoga career, her former life all gone. Christmas came and went. Vanessa didn't come to dinner. Mom left a plate for her anyway, covered in foil on the counter, as if she might walk in any moment. She called, Mom said quietly as I helped with dishes. She's working Christmas, triple overtime at the warehouse. Good for her, I said, and meant it. It was the first responsible decision she'd made in years. 3 days after New Year's, I got a letter, no return address, but I recognized Vanessa's handwriting. Rachel, you won, completely. I'm nobody now. No friends, no family, no future. Just debt and regret and 12-hour shifts that barely keep me alive. I used to think you were cruel. Now I understand you were just tired. Tired of being overlooked, undervalued, ignored. I made you invisible first. You just returned the favor. I'm not asking for forgiveness or help. I know better now. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to teach me. Everything has a price. Every choice has a consequence. Every person has a breaking point. You found mine. Congratulations. But here's what you might not understand. Yet, revenge doesn't fill the empty spaces. It just creates more of them. I hope your success brings you the happiness my failure never could. V. I read it twice, then filed it away in my accountability folder, the final document in a collection I'd never need to open again. That night, Mom called. The facility says Vanessa's doing well. She's been promoted to shift supervisor, $5 raise. That's good, I said, and found that I meant it. She's saving money, trying to get a real apartment by spring. With her credit, that'll be nearly impossible. I know. Mom paused. Are you happy? Rachel? Really happy. I looked around my apartment, nice furniture, successful business cards on my desk, industry awards on my shelf. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd earned, all of it feeling strangely hollow now that I had no one to prove myself against. I'm successful, I said, which wasn't really an answer. That's not what I asked. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, thinking about Vanessa in her transitional housing, working through another night shift. She was paying for her crimes, just as I'd planned. The golden child had fallen, and the invisible daughter had risen. But victory, I was learning, could feel an awful lot like emptiness. I opened my laptop and looked at the debt tracker one last time. With interest and fees, Vanessa owed more than the original amount despite months of payments. At her current rate, she'd be paying until she was 45. My finger hovered over the keyboard. It would be so easy to adjust the interest rate, to remove the fees, to make the debt actually payable, to show mercy. But I didn't, because this wasn't about mercy or justice anymore. It was about the principle. She'd stolen more than money, she'd stolen decades of recognition, love, and respect. $20,000 was a small price for that. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive kind now. Because I could afford it. I'd won everything I'd wanted. Vanessa was broken. Our parents finally saw her clearly, and I was successful beyond anything they'd ever imagined for me. So why did victory taste like ash? Maybe because revenge, I was learning, was just another kind of prison. Vanessa was trapped by debt, but I was trapped by something else, the knowledge that I'd become exactly as cruel as I'd always accused her of being. The only difference was, I'd been better at it. 6 weeks later, Dad died of a sudden heart attack. At the funeral, Vanessa stood at the back, in a borrowed black dress, tears streaming down her face. She left before the reception, probably to make her shift at the warehouse. In his will, Dad forgave her debt. Let the girls start fresh, his letter said. But we both knew it was too late for fresh starts. Too much had been broken, too much had been taken, too much had been lost in the name of evening the scales. I won my revenge. I destroyed my sister. And in the end, we were both invisible. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on Rachel's revenge. Was she justified, or did she go too far? Let me know what you think.